The cold wind cut through Sophia O'Malley's threadbare shawl as she stumbled along the desolate trail. Her once vibrant green eyes now dull and lifeless from days without proper nourishment. Wyoming Territory, 1878, unforgiving to those who dared traverse its vast expanses unprepared, especially a city woman with nothing but a small carpetbag and fading hope. Sophia had fled Denver with barely enough provisions for 3 days, never expecting the stagecoach accident that left her stranded in this wilderness. The other passengers had been rescued by relatives, but she had insisted on continuing alone, convinced she could make it to the next settlement. That had been 4 days ago. Her legs finally gave way beneath her, and she collapsed near a small creek, her strength utterly depleted. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purple's beauty she could no longer appreciate as hunger gnawed relentlessly at her insides. She closed her eyes, wondering if she would ever open them again, the sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered in her fading consciousness. A horse whinnied nearby, followed by the crunch of boots on rocky ground. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Rough hands, gentle in their touch, rolled her onto her back. Through blurred vision, Sophia saw the silhouette of a man against the darkening sky, broad-shouldered and wearing what appeared to be a cowboy hat. "You're alive." "That's something," the deep voice said. "Can you speak?" Sophia tried to form words, but her parched lips and throat produced only a faint rasp. The man understood immediately. "Water first," he said, lifting her head and bringing a canteen to her lips. "Slow now, just sips." The cool liquid was heaven against her cracked lips. After a few small swallows, her vision cleared enough to see her rescuer more clearly, weathered face, beard stubbled along a strong jaw, and eyes as blue as the Wyoming sky. "Thank you," she managed weakly. "Name's Finn Blackwell," he said, recorking the canteen. "What's a lady like you doing out here alone, Sophia?" "O'Malley," she whispered. "Stagecoach. Accident." Finn's expression darkened. "The Deadwood line that went down 3 days back. Madam, that's nearly 20 miles from here." She tried to nod, but even that small movement required too much energy. Her stomach cramped painfully and a small moan escaped her lips. "When's the last time you ate something?" Finn asked, his voice gentler now. "2, maybe 3 days," Sophia admitted. Without another word, Finn gathered her into his arms and carried her to his horse. With surprising care, he settled her onto the saddle before mounting behind her, one strong arm holding her securely against his chest. "My camp's not far," he explained as they rode. "Nothing fancy, but I've got food and shelter." Sophia wanted to thank him, to explain her situation, but exhaustion claimed her before she could form the words. When she next opened her eyes, she was lying on a bedroll inside a small tent. The scent of something cooking made her stomach clench painfully. She tried to sit up, but found even that simple task beyond her strength. The tent flap opened, and Finn ducked inside, carrying a battered tin plate. The aroma intensified, and Sophia realized he was bringing her food. "You're awake," he said, his tone betraying relief. "Thought I might have found you too late." "How long?" she asked, her voice still weak. "Few hours." Finn set the plate down and helped her into a sitting position, arranging his rolled-up coat behind her back for support. "You need to eat something, but we'll start slow. Your stomach won't handle much after going empty so long." She looked down at the plate beans, simply prepared with bits of salt pork. Never had anything looked so appetizing. Finn scooped up a small portion with the spoon and held it to her lips. "Just a little at first." Sophia accepted the offering, the simple flavors exploding across her tongue. She swallowed greedily, already opening her mouth for more. "Easy," Finn cautioned, giving her another small spoonful. "Too much too fast will make you sick." For several minutes they sat in silence as he patiently fed her, bite by careful bite. When half the plate was empty, he set it aside despite her protests. "That's enough for now," he said firmly. "We'll try more in an hour if this stays down." "Thank you," Sophia whispered, already feeling strength returning to her limbs. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." "No need for that." Finn's weathered face softened slightly. "Couldn't leave a lady to die in the wilderness. Where were you headed before the accident?" "Laramie," she replied. "I have a position waiting as a schoolteacher." Finn nodded thoughtfully. "Laramie's still a good 4 days' ride from here, and that's with a strong horse and good weather." He gestured to the tent around them. "Spring storm's coming in. We'll be camped here at least 2 days before it's safe to move on." Sophia's heart sank. "I've already delayed too long. The school term starts next week." "Better late than never showing up at all," Finn pointed out pragmatically. "And you wouldn't have made it another mile in your condition." The truth of his words hit her hard. "You saved my life." Finn looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Get some rest. I'll check on you in a while with more food." True to his word, Finn returned an hour later with the remaining beans, now reheated. This time he allowed her to feed herself, though he stayed nearby, his eyes watchful. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Blackwell," Sophia said between careful bites. "What brings you to this remote part of the territory?" "Just Finn," he corrected. "I'm a ranch hand mostly. Work cattle drives in the summer, odd jobs in winter. Was heading back to my employer's spread after delivering a message to Fort Laramie." "You work on a ranch near Laramie?" Hope fluttered in Sophia's chest. "About a day's ride north," he confirmed. "The Circle B belongs to Samuel Brennan. Good man to work for." "Then perhaps," she hesitated, not wanting to presume on his kindness. Finn seemed to read her thoughts. "I'll get you to Laramie once you're strong enough and the weather clears." "I couldn't impose, it's settled," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Now finish those beans." By the next morning, Sophia had regained enough strength to sit outside by the small fire Finn had built. The sky was leaden gray, confirming his prediction of an approaching storm. The air held a damp chill that penetrated even the heavy wool blanket he'd draped around her shoulders. Finn moved about the camp with the efficiency of a man accustomed to life outdoors. He prepared coffee in a blackened pot, occasionally glancing at her as if to reassure himself she hadn't vanished. "How did you come to be a schoolteacher in Wyoming Territory?" he asked, handing her a tin cup of steaming coffee. Sophia wrapped her fingers around the warmth gratefully. "I taught in Boston for 3 years, but after my parents died last autumn, there was nothing to keep me there. I saw an advertisement for teachers needed in the Western Territories, offering higher wages than I could earn back east." "Long way to come on your own," Finn observed. "I've always been independent," she replied with a small smile, "perhaps too much so." "Independence is fine until it gets you killed," he said bluntly. "These lands don't forgive mistakes, as I've discovered." She sipped her coffee, finding its bitter strength oddly comforting. "What about you? Do you have family nearby?" A shadow passed over Finn's face. "Lost my folks to typhoid when I was 16. Been making my own way since." "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly. He shrugged. "Was a long time ago." The first fat raindrops began to fall, sizzling as they hit the fire. Finn quickly helped Sophia back to the tent before securing the rest of their camp against the storm. By the time he joined her inside, rain was falling steadily, drumming against the canvas. "Looks like we're confined for a while," he said, shaking water from his hat before setting it aside. The tent was small, forcing them into closer proximity than was entirely proper, but Sophia found herself more concerned with his comfort than with social niceties. "You're soaked," she observed. "You should change before you catch a chill." Finn's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. "Worried about me now, Miss O'Malley? It would be poor repayment for your rescue if I allowed you to fall ill," she replied primly. "Fair enough." He reached for his saddlebag, pulling out a relatively dry shirt. "Turn around, if you please." Sophia obediently faced the tent wall, listening to the rustle of fabric as he changed. Despite her proper Boston upbringing, she found herself curious about this man who had saved her life, a man who lived by his own code in this wild country. "Decent now," he announced after a moment. She turned to find him settling on his bedroll, carefully maintaining a respectful distance from hers. Outside, the rain intensified, running in rivulets down the sides of the tent. "How long have you been in Wyoming?" she asked, drawing her blanket more securely around herself. "Going on 8 years now," Finn replied. "Came west after the war, worked my way up from Texas." "You fought in the war between the states?" Sophia couldn't hide her surprise. He didn't seem old enough. "Joined up in '63 when I was 17. Served with the Union Army until Appomattox." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Sophia detected the weight of difficult memories. "My brother Edward served as well," she offered. "He didn't come home." Finn met her eyes, a moment of understanding passing between them. "Many good men didn't." They talked through the afternoon as rain pounded the tent, sharing stories of their pasts that revealed more than perhaps either had intended. Sophia told him about her childhood in Boston, her love of teaching, and the grief of losing both parents within months of each other. Finn spoke of his years drifting through the West, working cattle drives in Texas, mining in Colorado, and finally finding a measure of stability at the Circle B ranch. As evening approached, Finn ventured out into the downpour long enough to retrieve supplies for their dinner, more beans, supplemented with jerky and hardtack. "Not exactly a Boston dining establishment," he apologized as they ate. Sophia smiled. "It's better than starving on the trail." "Low bar," Finn replied, but he returned her smile, transforming his rugged face into something almost handsome. The storm continued through the night and into the next day, forcing them to remain in close quarters. By the third morning, Sophia had learned to read Finn's moods and the subtle changes of his expression, and he seemed increasingly attuned to hers. When the rain finally ceased on the fourth day, Sophia emerged from the tent to find the world washed clean, sparkling with droplets that caught the morning sunlight. Her strength had returned, though she still tired easily. Finn was already breaking down camp, preparing for their journey. "We should reach Laramie in 3 days if we push on," he said, tightening a strap on his horse's saddle. Sophia felt an unexpected pang at the thought of their time together ending. "I'm grateful for your escort," she said formally, trying to recapture the proper distance between them. Finn paused in his work, studying her with those intense blue eyes. "You're still recovering. We'll take it slow." Their departure was delayed when Finn discovered one of his saddlebags had been damaged by the rain, requiring repairs before they could leave. Sophia sat nearby as he worked with needle and sinew, his large hands surprisingly deft at the delicate task. "Where did you learn to sew?" she asked, fascinated by the neat stitches he was producing. "Army," he replied without looking up. "Man learns to mend his own gear or goes without." "You're a man of many talents, Mr. Blackwell." He glanced up, catching the teasing note in her voice. "Just practical skills, Miss O'Malley. Nothing fancy like book learning." "There's wisdom in practical knowledge," she said seriously. "Some of my most educated colleagues in Boston couldn't start a fire or find food in the wilderness." "And a lot of good their books would do them then," Finn agreed, nodding off his thread. They set out just before noon, Sophia riding behind Finn on his horse, her arms encircling his waist for stability. The closeness was improper by Eastern standards, but necessity overruled convention. Still, she was acutely aware of his solid presence before her, the rhythm of his breathing, the occasional rumble of his voice as he pointed out landmarks. Their first day's travel was uneventful, covering ground slowly as Finn had promised. That evening they made camp beside a small stream, and Sophia insisted on helping prepare their meal. "You don't have to," Finn objected when she reached for the cooking pot. "I'm quite recovered, and I'll not be a burden," she replied firmly. "Besides, there must be more to your cooking repertoire than beans." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Got some flour and salt pork, could make biscuits." Together they prepared a simple but satisfying meal. As they ate, Sophia found herself studying Finn's profile in the firelight, noting the straight line of his nose, the set of his jaw beneath several days' growth of beard. He was not conventionally handsome by Boston standards, but there was something compelling about his face character etched by sun and hardship. "Something wrong with the food?" he asked, catching her gaze. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "No, it's delicious. I was just thinking." "Dangerous pastime," he commented, but his eyes held a warmth that belied the teasing words. That night, lying beneath the vast canopy of stars, Sophia admitted to herself that her feelings for this taciturn cowboy were evolving beyond simple gratitude. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. In just 2 more days, they would reach Laramie, and she would begin her new life, a life that had no place in it for a wandering ranch hand. Morning came with a brilliant sunrise and the distant bugling of elk. Finn was already up, preparing coffee when Sophia emerged from her bedroll. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing her a cup. "Very," she replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Though I confess I'm still adjusting to all this open space. Boston is rather more contained." "Too contained for my taste," Finn said. "Need room to breathe." They rode for several hours, the landscape gradually changing as they moved south. Shortly after midday, they crested a hill and saw smoke rising from what appeared to be a small homestead in the valley below. "Johnson Place," Finn explained. "Good folks. We can rest there a while, maybe get you a proper meal." The Johnson homestead proved to be a modest cabin with several outbuildings, a corral containing a few horses, and a small fenced garden. A woman stepped out onto the porch as they approached, shading her eyes against the sun. Behind her appeared a bearded man holding a rifle, though he lowered it when Finn called out a greeting. "Finn Blackwell. Been a spell since you passed this way," the man said as they dismounted. "Thomas." "Martha." Finn nodded to each in turn. "Hope you don't mind us stopping by. This is Miss Sophia O'Malley, heading to Laramie to teach school." Martha Johnson's weathered face broke into a welcoming smile. "A teacher? Lord knows we need more educated folks in these parts. Come in, come in. I just pulled a pie from the oven." The interior of the cabin was simple but spotlessly clean, with handmade furniture and colorful quilts providing comfort. Sophia found herself seated at the table with a generous slice of apple pie before she could properly thank their hosts. "Finn tells me you're from Boston," Martha said, pouring coffee for everyone. "Must be quite a change coming west." "Indeed," Sophia agreed, "though I'm finding the territory has its own unique beauty." Thomas Johnson snorted. "Beauty don't feed you in winter. Takes grit to survive out here." "Miss O'Malley has grit," Finn said quietly. "Found her half-starved on the trail after that stagecoach accident. She'd walked nearly 20 miles on her own." The Johnsons looked at her with new respect. "The Deadwood stage?" Thomas asked. "We heard about that." "Driver said all passengers were accounted for." "I insisted on continuing alone," Sophia admitted. "A foolish decision, as Mr. Blackwell has made abundantly clear." Finn's right about that, Martha said firmly, but you survived and that says something about your character. They spent a pleasant hour with the Johnsons, learning that they had homesteaded in the territory for nearly 15 years, raising 3 children who were now grown and establishing their own places nearby. "You staying the night?" Thomas asked as they prepared to leave. "Got room, and Martha always cooks too much." Finn glanced at Sophia. "We should press on if we want to reach Laramie on schedule." Though tempted by the offer of comfortable beds and home cooking, Sophia nodded her agreement. She was anxious to reach her destination on time, despite her growing reluctance to end her journey with Finn. The Johnsons sent them off with provisions, fresh bread, smoked meat, and the remainder of the apple pie. As they rode away, Sophia turned in the saddle to wave farewell. "They seem happy," she observed, "despite the hardships of frontier life." "They've built something real," Finn replied. "That's worth the struggle." They made camp that evening near a stand of cottonwoods, the setting sun painting the landscape in gold and amber. As they ate the Johnsons' bread and meat, Sophia found herself thinking about what constituted a real life. In Boston, she had her teaching and her small circle of friends, but no real connections, no roots. "Penny for your thoughts," Finn said, breaking into her reverie. Sophia smiled. "I was just thinking about what you said earlier about the Johnsons building something real. I wonder if my life in Laramie will feel real in the same way." "Depends on what you make of it," he replied, poking at the fire with a stick. "Teaching's important work. Those kids need someone who cares." "And what about you?" she asked, emboldened by the intimacy of the firelight. "Is ranch work real to you, or is it just a way to survive?" Finn was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Been saving to buy my own place. Small spread, nothing fancy. Just somewhere that's mine." The simple admission touched Sophia deeply. "I hope you get it," she said softly. He met her eyes across the fire, and something passed between them, an understanding perhaps, or something more. The moment stretched, taut with unspoken possibilities. Then Finn cleared his throat and looked away. "Should turn in. Long ride tomorrow." Sophia nodded, though sleep seemed impossible with her thoughts in such tumult. She retreated to her bedroll, listening to the night sounds and Finn's quiet movements as he banked the fire. What was she doing? Developing feelings for a man she had known less than a week. A man whose life was so different from her own. Yet in their short time together, he had shown her more kindness and understanding than any gentleman caller in Boston ever had. The next day dawned clear and cool, their breath forming small clouds in the morning air. They rode in companionable silence for the first few hours, each lost in private thoughts. By midday, they could see the distant outline of mountains to the west. "Medicine Bow Range," Finn informed her. "Laramie's nestled at the eastern edge." "It's beautiful," Sophia said, taking in the majestic peaks. "Can be deadly in winter," he cautioned. "But yes, beautiful." They stopped by a creek to rest the horse and eat some of the provisions the Johnsons had provided. Sitting on a fallen log, Sophia found herself searching for ways to prolong their conversation, reluctant to acknowledge that their journey was nearly complete. "What will you do after you deliver me to Laramie?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Finn shrugged. "Head back to the Circle B. Spring roundup starts soon. Of course." She picked at a piece of bread. "Will you? That is, perhaps you might visit Laramie occasionally. I would welcome a familiar face while I'm settling in." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Town's not far from the ranch. Might find reason to ride in now and then." Hope fluttered in Sophia's chest, but she tempered it with practicality. "I would like that. As friends, of course." "Of course," Finn echoed, though something in his tone suggested he was as uncertain of their relationship as she was. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the landscape gradually becoming more populated as they neared civilization. They passed several homesteads, and even a small mining operation where men covered in dirt waved as they rode by. By evening, they could see smoke from Laramie's chimneys in the distance, though they were still several hours' ride away. They made camp for what both knew would be their final night on the trail, an unspoken melancholy hanging between them. Finn seemed particularly quiet as he prepared their meal, his movements lacking their usual efficiency. Sophia busied herself collecting firewood, her mind racing with things she wanted to say but couldn't find the courage to express. When they finally sat down to eat, the silence became unbearable. "I can't thank you enough for all you've done," Sophia began awkwardly. "You've been more than kind." "Just did what anyone would do," Finn replied, not meeting her eyes. "No," she insisted. "Not anyone would have stopped. Not anyone would have cared for a stranger with such patience and respect. You're a good man, Finn Blackwell." He looked up then, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "And you're a remarkable woman, Sophia O'Malley. Laramie's lucky to get you as their teacher." The use of her first name, something he had studiously avoided until now, sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "Perhaps," she hesitated, gathering her courage. "Perhaps we needn't say goodbye tomorrow. As I said before, I would welcome visits if your duties permit." "Teaching position's respectable," Finn said slowly. "Wouldn't do your reputation any good to associate with a saddle tramp." "I don't care about that," Sophia replied with more force than she intended. I care about you." The words hung in the air between them, more revealing than she had meant them to be. Finn's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something softer, more vulnerable than she had yet seen on his weathered face. "Sophia," he said, her name a rough caress in his deep voice. "You don't know me, not really. Few days on the trail isn't enough to, isn't it?" she interrupted. "I've known Boston gentlemen for years without learning half as much about their true character as I've learned about yours in these days together." Finn set his plate aside and moved to sit beside her on the log they were using as a bench. Cautiously, as if she might pull away, he took her hand in his. "I'm not educated," he said quietly. "Don't have much to offer a lady like you." "You have integrity," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You have kindness and courage and honor. Those things matter far more to me than formal education or social position." He studied their joined hands, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Been alone a long time," he admitted. "Set in my ways." "As have I," she said with a small smile. "Perhaps we're both due for a change." Finn looked up, meeting her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he leaned forward until their faces were inches apart. "May I?" he whispered. Instead of answering, Sophia closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was tentative at first, then grew in confidence as he responded. His hand came up to cup her cheek, calloused fingers gentle against her skin. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he murmured. "Life is complicated," Sophia replied, her heart fuller than she could ever remember it being. "But some complications are worth embracing." That night, they slept with their bedrolls placed closer together, hands occasionally reaching across the space between them. They spoke in low voices long into the night, sharing hopes and fears that seemed safer to voice in darkness. Finn's dream of his own ranch, Sophia's determination to make a difference in her students' lives, their mutual loneliness and newfound hope. Morning came too soon, the rising sun signaling their final approach to Laramie. They packed camp in a silence that was contemplative rather than awkward, each processing the shift in their relationship. As they mounted Finn's horse for the last leg of their journey, Sophia settled against his back, her arms wrapping more confidently around his waist. He covered one of her hands with his own, squeezing gently before taking up the reins. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," she replied simply. And they rode toward Laramie, toward an uncertain future that suddenly held new possibilities. Laramie proved larger than Sophia had expected, with wooden buildings lining a main street that bustled with activity wagons, horsemen, and pedestrians creating a lively scene after days in the wilderness. People glanced curiously at them as they rode down the street, no doubt noting Sophia's disheveled appearance and close position behind Finn. "School's on the north end of town," Finn said over his shoulder. "Should we head there first, or find the boarding house?" "The school, please," Sophia replied. "I should introduce myself to the superintendent immediately, given my delayed arrival." Finn nodded and guided his horse through the town, eventually stopping before a 2-story wooden building with a small bell tower. Several children played in the yard despite the early hour, their shouts and laughter carrying on the morning air. Dismounting first, Finn held up his hands to help Sophia down. Their eyes met as her feet touched the ground, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said softly, the words encompassing far more than just his assistance in dismounting. A man emerged from the schoolhouse, squinting at them in the sunlight. "Can I help you folks?" he called, approaching with a slightly limping gait. Sophia straightened her travel-worn dress and stepped forward. "Good morning. I'm Sophia O'Malley, the new teacher from Boston. I apologize for my delayed arrival." The man's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Miss O'Malley, we'd given up hope." "Word came that the Deadwood stage went down, and when you didn't arrive with the other passengers, we assumed the worst." "There was a misunderstanding," she explained. "I continued on foot and became stranded. Mr. Blackwell found me and brought me safely to Laramie." The man turned to Finn, extending his hand. "Then we owe you our thanks, Mr. Blackwell. I'm Harold Jenkins, school superintendent." Finn shook the offered hand briefly. "Just doing what needed doing." "Nevertheless," Jenkins insisted, "our community is grateful. We've been without a proper teacher since Miss Winters left to get married last autumn." He turned back to Sophia. "We've arranged lodging for you at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. It's respectable and close to the school. If you'd like to get settled, I can show you there now, and we can discuss your duties afterward." "That would be most appreciated," Sophia replied, suddenly aware of how travel-stained and exhausted she must appear. An awkward silence fell as she realized the moment of parting from Finn had arrived. She turned to him, struggling to find appropriate words with Jenkins looking on. "Mr. Blackwell, I cannot adequately express my gratitude for your assistance," she said formally, though her eyes conveyed much more. Finn nodded, understanding her constraint. "My pleasure, Miss O'Malley. Perhaps I'll call on you sometime when I'm in town, see how you're settling in." "I would welcome that," she replied, heart lightening at his promise to return. Jenkins looked between them curiously but made no comment. "Mrs. Peterson's is just 3 blocks down. Shall we, Miss O'Malley?" With a last glance at Finn, Sophia followed the superintendent, acutely aware of Finn's eyes on her as she walked away. The boarding house proved to be a well-maintained 2-story home with lace curtains and a small front garden. Mrs. Peterson herself was a plump, cheerful widow who welcomed Sophia warmly and showed her to a comfortable room on the 2nd floor. "Baths down the hall," she explained. "I'll have hot water brought up right away. You look like you could use a good soak after your ordeal." "Thank you," Sophia replied gratefully. "That sounds heavenly." Once alone, Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, emotions overwhelming her now that she had reached her destination. Joy at having survived her journey mingled with anxiety about her new position, and, most confusingly, a deep ache at being separated from Finn. How had a man she'd known for less than a week come to mean so much to her? The promised bath revived her spirits somewhat, and changing into her one remaining clean dress carefully preserved in her carpet bag made her feel more like herself again. When she descended to the parlor, she found Jenkins waiting to escort her to the school for a proper tour. "Term starts Monday," he informed her as they walked. 27 students enrolled, ages 6 to 16. Most are from town, but a few ride in from nearby homesteads. The schoolhouse was simple but well-equipped, with rows of desks, a blackboard, and shelves of books. Sophia ran her fingers along the teacher's desk, already imagining herself standing before the class. "This is perfect," she said sincerely. Jenkins smiled, clearly pleased with her reaction. "We take education seriously here in Laramie, despite our frontier location. The children are eager to learn, though some of the older boys can be challenging." "I've dealt with challenging students before," Sophia assured him. "Structure and respect are key." They discussed curriculum and expectations for nearly an hour before Jenkins departed, leaving Sophia to familiarize herself with the classroom. She was examining the available textbooks when a knock at the open door startled her. She turned to find Finn standing in the doorway, hat in hand, looking somewhat uncomfortable in the school setting. "Finn," she exclaimed, unable to hide her delight. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Was getting supplies before heading back to the ranch," he explained, stepping inside. "Thought I'd check you were settled all right." "Very well, thank you." Sophia moved closer, wishing they could dispense with the formality that seemed to have reasserted itself now that they were in town. "The superintendent was most understanding about my delayed arrival, and Mrs. Peterson's boarding house is quite comfortable." Finn nodded, his eyes taking in the classroom. "Nice school." "Yes, it is." She hesitated, then asked, "When will you return to the Circle B?" "Tomorrow morning," he replied. "Got what I needed in town." The knowledge that he would soon be gone, with no certainty of when they might meet again, gave Sophia courage. "Finn, about last night, Miss O'Malley." Jenkins' voice interrupted as he appeared at the door. "Oh, I see Mr. Blackwell has found you. I forgot to mention, we're having a small welcome gathering at the church this evening. Nothing formal, just a chance for you to meet some of the parents and townspeople." "That sounds lovely," Sophia replied automatically, though her attention remained fixed on Finn. "Will you attend, Mr. Blackwell?" Finn shifted uncomfortably. "Not much for social gatherings, madam." "Nonsense!" Jenkins clapped him on the shoulder. "You must come. After all, without you, we wouldn't have our new teacher. 7 o'clock at the Methodist Church on Pine Street." With that, he departed again, leaving them in an awkward silence. "You don't have to attend," Sophia said softly. "I understand if you prefer not to." Finn studied her face for a long moment. "Would you want me there?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Very much." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Then I'll be there." Relief and happiness flooded through her. "Thank you," he nodded, replacing his hat. "Should let you get back to your books. Until this evening, Miss O'Malley." The formality stung a little after the intimacy they had shared on the trail, but Sophia understood the necessity of discretion in their new surroundings. "Until this evening, Mr. Blackwell," she replied with a small smile. The welcome gathering at the church was more elaborate than Jenkins had indicated, with tables of food and nearly half the town in attendance. Sophia stood near the entrance with the superintendent and his wife. being introduced to a steady stream of parents and community members whose names quickly became a blur. Her eyes kept drifting to the door, watching for Finn. As the evening progressed and he didn't appear, disappointment settled heavily in her chest. Perhaps he had thought better of attending, uncomfortable with the social setting or the attention his presence might draw. She was making polite conversation with the banker's wife when a murmur ran through the crowd. Turning, she saw Finn standing in the doorway, looking distinctly out of place in his trail clothes, though she noted he had made an effort. His hair was damp from washing, his beard trimmed, and he wore a clean shirt. Their eyes met across the room, and Sophia couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. Excusing herself from the banker's wife, she made her way toward him, conscious of curious glances following her progress. "You came," she said simply when she reached him. "Said I would," he replied, his discomfort evident in the stiff way he held himself. "I'm glad," she gestured toward the gathering. "It's rather more formal than I expected. Notice that." His eyes scanned the well-dressed townspeople. "Not really my element." "Nor mine, if I'm honest," Sophia confessed. "In Boston, I was considered something of a bluestocking, too focused on books and teaching to be properly sociable." The revelation seemed to ease some of Finn's tension. "Hard to picture you not fitting in." Before she could respond, Jenkins appeared at her elbow. "Ah, Mr. Blackwell, glad you could join us. Come, let me introduce you to some of our leading citizens. They're all eager to thank the man who saved our new teacher." Finn shot Sophia a look of barely concealed dismay as Jenkins led him away. She followed, amused by his discomfort, yet touched that he had endured it for her sake. The evening progressed more pleasantly than Sophia had anticipated. After the initial awkwardness, Finn seemed to relax somewhat, particularly when conversation turned to subjects he knew well: cattle, horses, and the territory's geography. Several of the ranchers present sought his opinion on matters related to the upcoming cattle drive season, treating him with respect that visibly surprised him. For her part, Sophia found herself warming to the community. Behind the formal welcome lay genuine interest in education and sincere gratitude for her willingness to take the position. Several mothers invited her to Sunday dinner in the coming weeks, and the general store owner offered a discount on any supplies she might need for the classroom. As the gathering began to disperse, Finn made his way back to her side. "Ready to head back to your boarding house?" he asked quietly. "Thought I might walk you there if that's proper." "Perfectly proper," Sophia assured him, touched by his concern for her reputation. "And most welcome. Let me just thank Mrs. Jenkins for the lovely evening." After making their farewells, they stepped out into the cool night air. The streets of Laramie were quiet now, most businesses closed for the evening. A nearly full moon illuminated their path, casting long shadows across the boardwalk. They walked in silence for a few moments, both seemingly reluctant to break the peaceful atmosphere. Finally, Finn spoke. "Seems like good folks," he observed. "Think you'll be happy here?" "I believe so," Sophia replied thoughtfully. "They clearly value education, which is important to me. And the children I've met so far seem bright and eager." They reached Mrs. Peterson's boarding house too quickly. Standing on the bottom step, Sophia turned to face Finn, reluctant to say goodbye. "When will you return to town?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "Usually come in once a month for supplies," he replied. "But with Roundup coming, of course, you'll be busy." She tried to hide her disappointment. Finn studied her face in the moonlight. "Could make a special trip, though, maybe in 2 weeks. Hope blossomed in her chest. "I would like that very much." He glanced at the boarding house windows, where curtains occasionally twitched with curious observers. "Not much privacy here." "No," Sophia agreed ruefully. Mrs. Peterson runs a respectable establishment." "Would it be proper," Finn asked hesitantly, "to call on you? Officially, I mean. Sunday afternoon when you're not teaching," the formal request, so at odds with their days of enforced intimacy on the trail, brought a smile to Sophia's lips. "Very proper, Mr. Blackwell. I would be delighted to receive you." Relief crossed his face. "Good, that's good." Impulsively, Sophia reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for coming tonight. I know it wasn't easy for you." "Worth it," he replied simply, his eyes conveying what he couldn't say aloud on a public street. "Good night, Finn," she whispered. "Good night, Sophia." She watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the shadows. Only when he was completely out of sight did she enter the boarding house, her heart both fuller and more turbulent than it had been since leaving Boston. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity as Sophia began her teaching duties. The children proved generally receptive, though, as Jenkins had warned, some of the older boys initially tested her authority. By the end of the first week, however, she had established clear expectations and even won over most of the skeptics with her genuine interest in their progress. She quickly settled into the rhythm of Laramie life: breakfast with the other boarders at Mrs. Peterson's table, days at the schoolhouse, evenings preparing lessons, or attending various church and community functions. The townspeople were welcoming, if somewhat curious about the Eastern teacher who had arrived in such dramatic circumstances. Many inquired about "that cowboy who rescued you," their tones suggesting both admiration for his heroism and uncertainty about his character. Sophia found herself defending Finn more than once, emphasizing his kindness and integrity. "He seems a decent sort for a drifting ranch hand," Mrs. Peterson commented one evening as she poured tea in the parlor. "Thomas at the general store says he pays his bills prompt and never causes trouble when he's in town, unlike some of the cowboys." "Mr. Blackwell is a man of principle," Sophia replied, perhaps more firmly than the situation warranted. "He could have left me to die on the trail, but instead he cared for me with nothing but respect and consideration." Mrs. Peterson raised an eyebrow at her vehemence but merely said, "Well, he's certainly welcome to call here if he's in town. Any man who would save a lady in distress deserves that courtesy at least." Sunday afternoon arrived with agonizing slowness. Sophia returned from church services and changed into her best dress, a blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She was arranging her hair when Mrs. Peterson knocked at her door. "Mr. Blackwell is in the parlor," she announced with barely concealed curiosity. "Shall I tell him you'll be down shortly?" "Yes, thank you," Sophia replied, trying to calm her racing heart. When she descended to the parlor a few minutes later, she found Finn standing awkwardly by the fireplace, hat in hand, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the feminine setting. He had made an obvious effort with his appearance. His clothes were clean, his hair neatly combed, and he had shaved his beard completely, revealing a strong jawline she had only glimpsed before. "Miss O'Malley," he said formally when she entered, though his eyes conveyed a much warmer greeting. "Mr. Blackwell," she replied with equal formality, aware of Mrs. Peterson hovering nearby. "How lovely to see you again. Thought we might take a walk," he suggested, "if that would be agreeable." "Most agreeable," Sophia confirmed, reaching for her shawl. Mrs. Peterson cleared her throat meaningfully. "Back by supper, Miss O'Malley. 6 o'clock sharp." "Of course, Mrs. Peterson." Sophia tried not to smile at the woman's obvious attempt at chaperoning. "Mr. Blackwell and I will simply be enjoying the fine weather." They escaped into the afternoon sunshine, both releasing audible sighs of relief once they were beyond the boarding house's front gate. "Feels like being watched by a schoolmarm," Finn muttered. "No offense to your profession." Sophia laughed, the tension of the past 2 weeks easing in his presence. "None taken. Mrs. Peterson takes her responsibility for her female boarders very seriously." They walked toward the small park at the edge of town, conscious of maintaining a proper distance between them on the public streets. Once there, they found a bench partially screened by flowering bushes that offered a modicum of privacy while remaining in plain view enough to preserve propriety. "You look well," Finn observed as they sat. "Teaching agrees with you." "I'm enjoying it tremendously," Sophia confirmed. "The children are bright and curious despite some initial testing of boundaries. And you? How are things at the Circle B?" "Busy with roundup preparations," he replied. "Brennan's expanding the herd this year, which means more work but also more pay." "That's wonderful." She studied his face, noting the additional lines of fatigue around his eyes. "Though you look tired," he shrugged. "Been working dawn to dusk. Worth it, though. Every dollar gets me closer to my own place." "Have you found land you're interested in?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious about his dreams. "There's a small parcel north of here," Finn admitted. "Nothing fancy, creek running through it, decent grazing, old cabin that needs work. Owners willing to sell come autumn." The way he described it, with quiet longing in his voice, made Sophia wish she could see this place that meant so much to him. "It sounds perfect," she said softly. Their conversation flowed easily after that, covering the events of the past 2 weeks, Sophia's teaching experiences and adjustment to Laramie, Finn's work at the ranch, and the characters he encountered there. The afternoon passed too quickly, and soon the church bell was tolling 5 o'clock, warning that they had only an hour before Sophia was expected back at the boarding house. "Walk you back?" Finn asked, rising reluctantly from the bench. "Not yet," Sophia replied impulsively. "Let's take the long way around. I've been curious about the rest of the town." They strolled through parts of Laramie that Sophia hadn't yet explored, past the livery stable, where Finn pointed out a particularly fine Morgan horse, around the construction site of a new bank building, and finally along the edge of town, where open country began. "Wish I could show you the land I've been saving for," Finn said as they gazed at the distant mountains. "It's pretty country, especially now with spring coming on." "Perhaps someday you will," Sophia ventured, her heart beating faster at the implication. Finn turned to her then, his blue eyes serious. "I'd like that. There's a lot I'd like to show you, Sophia." The use of her first name, combined with the intensity of his gaze, made her breath catch. They were alone here at the edge of town, no curious eyes watching. Finn seemed to realize this too, for he took a step closer, his hand reaching for hers. "I've thought about you every day," he admitted, his voice low. "Tried to focus on work, but you keep slipping into my mind." "I've thought of you too," Sophia confessed, her fingers intertwining with his. "Far more than is proper for a schoolteacher." A smile tugged at his lips. "Propriety seems less important out here than back east." "One of the many things I'm coming to appreciate about the West," she replied with answering smile. His free hand rose to touch her cheek, calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "May I kiss you, Sophia O'Malley? Properly this time, not in the middle of nowhere with you half-starved." "Yes," she whispered, already leaning toward him. His lips met hers softly at first, then with increasing confidence as she responded. His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened. Sophia's hands found their way to his shoulders, steadying herself against the rush of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "Been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you sitting in that schoolroom," he murmured. "I'm glad you waited until we had privacy," Sophia replied with a small laugh. "Mrs. Peterson would have had apoplexy. Finn grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Would have been worth it. The church bell tolled the half-hour, reminding them of the time. With reluctance, they began walking back toward town, hands still joined until they reached the first buildings where they separated to a proper distance. "When can I see you again?" Finn asked as Mrs. Peterson's boarding house came into view. "I'm free next Sunday afternoon as well," Sophia offered. "Or any evening after school, though I do have papers to grade most nights." "Could help with that," he suggested. "Can't promise I'd be much use with the book learning, but I could keep you company." The image of quiet evenings spent together, sharing the simple pleasure of each other's presence while she worked, appealed to Sophia immensely. "I would like that," she said warmly. "Perhaps Wednesday, around 7. "I'll be here," Finn promised as they reached the boarding house gate. Mrs. Peterson's curtains twitched visibly as they stopped outside. "Our audience awaits," Sophia murmured, amused despite her frustration at the constant surveillance. Finn glanced at the window and sighed. "Guess a proper goodbye is out of the question." "Until Wednesday," she said, offering her hand formally. He took it, squeezing gently before releasing it. "Until Wednesday, Miss O'Malley." The spring weeks passed in a pattern that gradually became familiar. Sophia teaching during the week, Finn riding into town every few days to see her. They developed routines that balanced propriety with their growing need for each other's company. Walks in the park, quiet conversations on the boarding house porch under Mrs. Peterson's watchful eye, and occasionally, precious moments of privacy at the edge of town where they could speak freely and share kisses that grew increasingly passionate. Laramie society took note of their courtship, reactions ranging from approval to concern. Some, like Superintendent Jenkins and his wife, seemed genuinely pleased for them. Others, particularly some of the more socially prominent ladies, made comments within Sophia's hearing about the unsuitability of a refined Eastern lady forming an attachment to a common ranch hand. Sophia ignored the gossip, her feelings for Finn growing stronger with each meeting. She came to know him deeply, his quiet strength, his unfailing honesty, his surprising gentleness beneath the weathered exterior. She learned about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his difficult years after the war, and his unwavering determination to build something lasting in this harsh but beautiful land. For his part, Finn seemed increasingly comfortable in Laramie, nodding to shopkeepers who now greeted him by name, occasionally joining conversations with the men outside the general store. He even attended church services with Sophia one Sunday, sitting stiffly in his best clothes but paying careful attention to the sermon. By early summer, their attachment was common knowledge in Laramie. Sophia found herself fielding delicate inquiries from Mrs. Peterson and other ladies about her intentions, while Finn reported similar questioning from the men at the ranch. "Brennan pulled me aside yesterday," he told her during one of their walks. "Asked if I was serious about you or just passing time." "And what did you tell him?" Sophia asked, her heart beating faster. Finn stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "Told him I've never felt this way about anyone. Told him I can't imagine my life without you in it now." Sophia's breath caught. "Finn." "I know it's fast," he continued, taking her hands in his. "Known each other barely 3 months, but I've been thinking about that land I told you about. Cabin needs work, but it could be a proper home with some effort." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "Been thinking about what it would be like with you there, with us there together." "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Sophia whispered, scarcely daring to hope. "Not doing it right," Finn muttered, then to her surprise lowered himself to one knee before her. "Sophia O'Malley, will you marry me? I can't offer much yet, but I swear I'll work every day to build a good life for us." Joy bubbled up within her, so intense she felt she might float away with it. "Yes," she said through tears that had suddenly appeared. "Yes, Finn Blackwell, I will marry you." He rose and pulled her into his arms, unconcerned with who might see them. Their kiss was deep and promising, sealing their commitment to each other. "When?" he asked when they finally parted. "The school term ends next month. Could be married before autumn, be in our own place before winter." The reality of it struck Sophia. Then she would be leaving her teaching position, moving to an isolated homestead with a man she had known for such a short time. Yet she felt no doubt, only certainty that this was right, that Finn was the man she was meant to share her life with. "August," she decided. "After the term ends, but before your autumn cattle work begins." Finn nodded, his smile wider than she had ever seen it. "August it is." News of their engagement spread quickly through Laramie. Reactions were mixed as expected, but many offered genuine congratulations. Superintendent Jenkins expressed regret at losing her as a teacher, but assured her there would be a position waiting if she ever wished to return. "Teaching can be done anywhere," Sophia told him. "Perhaps someday I might organize lessons for the children of nearby homesteads." Mrs. Peterson was predictably flustered by the speed of the engagement, but ultimately supportive. "He's a good man," she admitted to Sophia one evening. "Rough around the edges, but solid underneath. And the way he looks at you, well, a woman doesn't find that kind of devotion every day." The final weeks of the school term passed in a blur of activity. In addition to her teaching duties, Sophia found herself preparing for a very different life than she had envisioned when arriving in Laramie. She ordered practical items from the general store: sturdy cookware, warm bedding, tools for gardening. She studied books on homesteading and listened carefully to advice from the ranch wives she had befriended. Finn rode into town whenever his duties permitted, often bringing small gifts: wildflowers, a carved wooden box for her hairpins, once even a kitten he had rescued from a barn owl. "Thought you might want company out at the homestead," he explained as the tiny creature purred in Sophia's hands. "Gets lonely sometimes when I'm working with the herd." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. "She's perfect," Sophia declared, nuzzling the kitten's soft fur. "I'll call her Hope." "Fitting name," Finn agreed, his eyes warm as he watched her. In July, with the school term ended, Finn took Sophia to see the land he was purchasing. They rode out early one morning, Sophia seated comfortably on a gentle mare Finn had borrowed from the Circle B. The journey took several hours, leading them north through rolling grasslands and stands of cottonwoods. As they crested a small rise, Finn reined his horse to a stop. "There it is," he said, gesturing to the valley below. 200 acres, creek running year-round, good shelter from the winter winds. Sophia followed his gaze, taking in the expanse of land dotted with wildflowers, the silver ribbon of the creek, and the small log cabin nestled against a backdrop of pines. It was wild and beautiful in a way Boston could never be, full of possibility and promise. "It's wonderful," she breathed, meaning it completely. They rode down to explore more closely. The cabin was simple but solidly built: one main room with a stone fireplace, a small loft above for sleeping. It needed repairs: certainly new chinking between the logs, a properly fitted door, glass for the windows, but Sophia could already envision it transformed into a home. "Thinking we could add on here," Finn explained, pointing to the eastern wall. "Another room or two as we need them." As they need them. For children, he meant, though he didn't say it aloud. The thought both thrilled and terrified Sophia. Becoming a wife was overwhelming enough without contemplating motherhood as well. Yet standing here with Finn, seeing their future taking shape before them, she felt equal to the challenge. "It will be perfect," she assured him, slipping her hand into his. They spent the day exploring their future property, riding the boundaries, identifying the best location for a garden, wading in the creek that would provide their water. By the time they started back to Laramie, Sophia had fallen in love with the land almost as deeply as she had fallen for Finn. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations. Finn worked tirelessly on the cabin, riding out after his duties at the Circle B to make repairs and improvements. Sophia packed her belongings and sewed new curtains and linens for their home. They were married on a bright August morning in Laramie's Methodist Church. Sophia wore her best blue dress, refusing to delay for the arrival of a proper wedding gown that had been ordered from Denver. Finn appeared in new clothes purchased for the occasion, looking handsome if somewhat uncomfortable in the formal attire. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, attended by most of the townspeople who had come to know and respect the unlikely couple. Even Mrs. Peterson dabbed at her eyes as they spoke their vows, while Superintendent Jenkins beamed like a proud father when Finn placed the simple gold band on Sophia's finger. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Blackwell." Finn's kiss was gentle and reverent, a promise of all that lay ahead. When they turned to face their friends and neighbors as husband and wife, Sophia felt a sense of rightness that transcended all the doubts and difficulties they had faced. Their wedding celebration continued at the town hall, with food contributed by many of the townswomen and music provided by local fiddlers. As the afternoon lengthened into evening, Sophia found herself increasingly aware of what would follow their first night together as husband and wife. They had arranged to spend their wedding night at Laramie's small hotel before departing for their homestead the following morning. As Finn led her up the stairs to their room, Sophia felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness that made her palms damp and her heart race. "Nervous?" Finn asked softly when they were alone in the simple but clean room. "A little," she admitted. "Though not afraid, never that with you." His smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "We have all the time in the world, Sophia. Nothing needs to happen that you're not ready for." The consideration in his words only deepened her love for him. Rising on tiptoe, she kissed him with all the passion she had been restraining during their courtship. His response was immediate, arms tightening around her as the kiss deepened. That night, they discovered each other fully for the first time, learning the contours of each other's bodies, sharing whispered words of love and desire. Finn was gentle, patient with her inexperience, guiding her through moments of discomfort until they found rhythm and pleasure together. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Sophia felt a profound contentment she had never known before. "Happy, Mrs. Blackwell," Finn murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Completely," she replied, raising her head to meet his gaze. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he confessed, pulling her closer. "Never imagined finding someone like you, especially not half dead on the trail." Sophia laughed softly. "Not the most romantic beginning to a love story." "Worked out all right in the end," Finn observed with a smile. "Though I still maintain you should have stayed with that stagecoach. If I had," she pointed out, "we might never have met." "True enough." He kissed her forehead. "Guess I should be thankful for your stubborn streak after all." The following morning, they packed their belongings and set out for their homestead. The journey felt different now, not an exploration, but a homecoming. When they crested the rise and saw the cabin below, Sophia felt a surge of emotion at the sight of smoke rising from the chimney. "Thomas Johnson rode out yesterday to get things ready," Finn explained when he saw her surprise. Said it was his wedding gift to us. The cabin had been transformed in their absence. The holes between the logs had been chinked, glass installed in the windows, and a proper door hung on iron hinges. Inside, they found the fireplace lit, the rough plank floor swept clean, and a new bed frame assembled in the corner with their mattress and bedding already in place. On the table stood a basket containing bread, preserves, and a small cake, with a note from Martha Johnson wishing them happiness in their new home. Beside it sat another gift, a handsome clock from the citizens of Laramie, with a card signed by many of the townspeople. "It's perfect," Sophia said, turning to embrace her husband. "Everything is perfect." Their first weeks of marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. Sophia learned to cook on the fireplace until Finn installed a proper stove, to draw water from the creek, to tend the small garden they had planted. Finn continued working at the Circle B, riding out early each morning and returning at dusk, though he promised the arrangement was temporary until their homestead became self-sufficient. Autumn arrived with brilliant colors and cooler temperatures. Sophia found herself busy preserving the garden's bounty for winter, learning from neighboring women who rode over to share their knowledge and welcome her to the community of homesteaders. By winter, they had settled into comfortable routines. Finn had added a lean-to for his horse and the cow he had purchased, and had stockpiled enough firewood to see them through the coldest months. Sophia had transformed the interior of the cabin with curtains, rugs, and small touches that made the rustic space feel like home. Snow came early that year, sometimes keeping Finn at the Circle B when weather made the journey home too treacherous. Those nights were long for Sophia, though Hope the kitten, now a full-grown cat, provided company, and she used the time to read or write letters to her friends in Boston. When spring arrived, bringing new growth and warmer days, Sophia had news of her own to share. "I think we'll need to build that addition sooner than planned," she told Finn one evening as they sat before the fire. He looked up from the bridle he was repairing, confusion giving way to understanding as she placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "You're certain?" he asked, voice hushed with wonder. "As certain as I can be," she confirmed. "The baby should arrive in late autumn." Finn set aside his work and moved to kneel before her chair, placing his hand over hers. "A baby," he repeated as if testing the reality of the word. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Sophia asked, though his expression already told her the answer. "More than I can say," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Never thought I'd have all this, the land, you, and now a child." He pressed a gentle kiss to her hand. "You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible, Sophia Blackwell." The months that followed were busy ones. True to his word, Finn began construction on an addition to the cabin, a proper bedroom to give them more space when the baby arrived. Neighbors helped with the raising of the walls, the community coming together as they did for all significant projects. Sophia's body changed as their child grew within her. She found herself tiring more easily, but continued managing their home and even started informal lessons for 2 children from a neighboring homestead who rode over 3 times a week. In October, as the leaves turned gold and crimson, their daughter was born with the assistance of Martha Johnson and a midwife from a nearby settlement. They named her Emma Faith Blackwell, Emma for Sophia's mother, Faith for the belief that had brought them together and sustained their journey. Holding his daughter for the first time, Finn's weathered face reflected a vulnerability Sophia had rarely seen. "She's perfect," he whispered, one finger gently stroking the infant's cheek. "Perfect just like her mother." Life settled into new rhythms with Emma's arrival. The winter passed in a cocoon of family warmth, the three of them sheltered in their expanded cabin while snow piled high outside. By spring, Finn had resigned from the Circle B to work their land full-time, increasing their garden and adding more livestock. As Emma grew from infant to toddler, the homestead prospered. Finn built a proper barn and expanded their herd of cattle. Sophia's informal teaching grew to include 5 children from surrounding homesteads, gathered around their table 3 days a week for lessons. 2 years after Emma's birth, their son arrived, Samuel Finn Blackwell, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and determined expression. Their family felt complete, their life rich with purpose and love. On warm evenings, they would often sit together on the porch Finn had built, watching their children play in the yard while the setting sun painted the horizon in brilliant colors. During one such evening, as Emma chased butterflies and baby Sam dozed in Sophia's arms, Finn reached over to take her free hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Leaving Boston, becoming a rancher's wife instead of continuing as a teacher in town?" Sophia considered the question seriously, knowing Finn would accept nothing less than her honest answer. She thought about the hardships they had faced, the isolation during harsh winters, the endless physical labor, the simple lifestyle so different from her Boston upbringing. Then she looked at their thriving homestead, their beautiful children, and the man beside her who had shown her what true partnership meant, who had once found her starving on the trail and had not only saved her life, but had given her a life more meaningful than she had ever imagined possible. "Not for a single moment," she replied with absolute certainty. "This is where I belong, with you, with our children in this home we've built together." Finn's smile was tender as he leaned over to kiss her. Who would have thought beans on the trail would lead to all this? Sophia laughed softly, remembering those first difficult days. "It wasn't the beans that captured my heart, Finn Blackwell. It was the man who cared enough to sit beside me until I ate them." "Best decision I ever made," he murmured, his arms slipping around her shoulders as they watched the sunset together. Their children playing in the golden light, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Wyoming sky.